let's get started. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call to order the work session for the East Grand Forks City Council for Tuesday, August 25th, 2026. Would the city clerk please call roll?
Mayor Mark Golstead.
Here.
Council President Brian Larson.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Riebel.
Here.
Council Members Tammy Schumacher.
Here.
Pug Shavinsky.
Here.
Dale Helms.
Here.
Don Caseme.
Here.
Karen Peterson.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Let's start with item number 1 here on the work session agenda. Request approval of proposal for grant writing services from Widseth for Minnesota DOT Local Road Improvement Program. Mr. Huttunen.
Okay, thank you, Council President, Mayor, members. This is a grant opportunity through the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Mr. Steve Emery and I have had a few discussions with their Widseth's funding specialist, who at times helps write grant applications for cities that they work with. As we look at the proposed development of the property that was owned by Simplot, we've been looking at various grant opportunities, whether they be through Minnesota DEED or through the DOT, on those that may be a viable, eligible option for a project on the Simplot property. The way that I guess we desire the property to be developed for commercial and or mixed-use residential, it really limits the grant opportunities through DEED, because one of the main criteria of DEED typically is that it create jobs in manufacturing or in industrial type uses. So it's really been limited for that. But we have found that this program does appear to be a viable option. It is a up to $1.5 million award opportunity for the city. One of the criteria for eligibility is that it have a route of regional significance from an economic standpoint. It needs to be a main thoroughfare through the city or help relieve traffic from main thoroughfares that may move through the city. And we think that because of the traffic count on Highway 2 and the opportunity to create access from Highway 2 into this property to help drive some economic impact, that would make it eligible. It does not require a match. Mr. Emery has started to put together some desktop estimates of even just the streets and the storm sewer that would go into the proposed property, and the quick desktop estimates he has without any design work is looking at potentially a $3 million project. So we would likely, if we were to be awarded, we would likely have some local commitment to it on top of that $1.5 million award. If you can follow my cursor here, I guess what we're looking at is 3rd Avenue Northeast. That's an existing road right now that will need to have some improvements made, be widened a bit, and have curb and gutter and storm sewer added. And then we'd be looking at adding a Highway 2 frontage road that loops back around to connect back to 10th Street on the east side of the Circle K gas station. We would anticipate that and 3rd Avenue would all be publicly owned streets. With this development, this kind of internal road that's being shown right now is just really for concept to try to give developers a little bit of an insight of how we could potentially see it be envisioned, developed. But this we would anticipate either be parking lots or a private access road by whoever the ultimate private property owners are. So we're more looking at the loop around the outside of the property as being what would be included in a grant opportunity like this. The request in front of you is to have Widseth help with grant writing, and one of the requirements is that we include a preliminary design and preliminary design estimates. So it would not be to full plans and specs ready to go to bid, but it would at least give a preliminary design package for MNDOT to review, and give us a good understanding that we knew fairly sound approximate cost of the project should we be awarded.
All right, thanks, Reid. Any questions for Reid on the proposal for grant writing services? Okay. Looks like it's pretty clear. Okay, thank you. Let's go on to item number 2 then. Request to rent Blue Line Club Arena ice time to the EGF Blue Line Club and Northern Lights Figure Skating Club. Mr. Erickson.
Sneak in here.
Perfect. President, council members, mayor. Attached, there's agreements, extremely similar to the ones that have been used in the past, but both the Northern Lights Figure Skating Club and East Grand Forks Blue Line Club is looking to use, starting on September 8th, the Blue Line Club Arena for their fall, afternoon, and evening weekend activities. Rental rate for $12,000 for the Blue Line Club and $53.80 for the Figure Skating Club, Northern Lights Figure Skating Club to be exact. But that would just be starting that first week in September, second week of September, excuse me.
Okay, thanks, Jorgen. Any questions for Jorgen? Go ahead, Mr. Helms.
Is that, those costs, is that aligned with years past, or is that up a little bit? Or?
Yeah, last year it was $14,725 for the Blue Line Club. They're using one less week this year. For the Figure Skating Club, it was only $1,200 last year, but they were only using 2 days for 2 hours. So it's just for increased usage, based off that same $75 or $80 rental hour rate that's typically been used, to my understanding.
Okay. So the rate itself is consistent. It just goes up and down based on the amount of time that they're...
Correct. Correct. Yeah, Figure Skating Club's going to be doing a ton more this upcoming fall.
Okay. Do you have a question there? Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is the selection of auditing services for years 26, 27, and 28. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, President, Council, and Mayor. Attached, I sent to RCA explaining how we had gotten an RFP, or request for proposals, for 23, 24, and 25, and that on that request, there was an option for extending for another 3 years. And so we asked Brady Martz, who has been doing it for the last 3 years, to give us a proposal for the extension. And attached was that. And actually, I looked back to some of the proposals we had received before, the first time we did it, and the costs are almost the same to where Brady's is now. One of them is even still higher than where we started. So we also would recommend having Brady Martz because we are changing our ERP system in the middle of the year next year. So it would be best to have an auditor that's familiar with at least our old system and probably our new system too. So we're looking just to extend that for 3 years.
ERP is the financial
Yeah, it's
software.
everything, yeah. It's a whole system. We're going with Tyler Technologies.
Sure. You don't want to throw a new auditor in the mix while you're...
No, because we're not starting our first payroll is not going to be until April 1st. We would hope that we would be able to start January 1st. The company is not capable of doing that for us, and so they're going to start in a new quarter for the payroll. A couple of the systems will hopefully start before then, maybe even January 1st on some of the different systems. So.
Okay. Any questions for Karla on the auditing services from Brady Martz?
Thank you.
Karla, I think I know the answer, but we are required to do an audit every year.
Absolutely.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, this isn't an optional.
Yep, and actually the dollars can change, fluctuate from year to year because some years we have to do a single audit for the federal government, depending on how many federal dollars we have received that year, and other years we do not.
Okay.
So, for example, this year we did not have a single audit, but the year before we did. Next year we know we'll be having a single audit because we are doing our project, our federal highway project that we get money for, and between that and transit, that gets us over the limit. The limit went from $750,000 now to $1 million, but that still gets us over the limit.
Okay, so every year we have over $1 million in federal funds. We'll have some additional.
Like every other year, or even every fourth year. We know that because of when those construction dollars come in.
Got it.
That are on that rotating basis.
Okay.
So when we do the bridge, which is federal dollars, the Point Bridge, yes.
That puts us over that threshold.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Karla on the auditing? Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you'll stick around here, item number 4, 2026 preliminary budget discussion. Reid Huttunen and Karla Anderson.
All right, thank you again, council members. I've put together a presentation that kind of summarizes the budget that was included in the city council packet, and we'll walk through those between Karla and myself. If there are any questions as we go along, please stop us and ask, and we can address them as we go. The budget proposal that's in front of you, just to again reiterate and summarize, is the cumulative of all of the presentations that we heard from departments over the last 2 weeks or so. So now we'll just kind of walk through the total, what does it all add up to, and talk through ultimately a proposed levy, and then answer questions and any next steps. All right, so a couple first slides here looking at operating expenditures. This is comparison of 2026 to 2027 across all departments. Adds up to the bottom line. The increase from 2026 is $548,057, or a change of 4.1%. This is all, of course, personnel, supplies, repairs and maintenance, utilities, health insurance benefits, you name it, that all falls into these line items across all departments in the general fund for the city. The second slide, capital outlay and other uses. This is, again, expenditures out of the general fund. There's some ups and downs here. Generally, the total adds up to a decrease of $89,345, or a change of lower by 7.2% from 2026. And a lot of the items in this are tied to our capital improvement plan. I've got another slide that goes through the equipment purchases that are on the request for 2027 here. One thing that is not included in the slide deck tonight, but that is in your packet as we talk about capital improvement, just a point to remind, there are a number of items that are being paid through the capital improvement financing fund. Those would be larger expenditures like a motor grader or a payloader, as an example, that we have a recurring annual payment on. We finance those through our own fund. So there is an ongoing capital expense to those. But when I get to my capital improvement slide, they're not shown there. They are just in your budget document to look at. Okay, total kind of summary of the expenses, the general expenses of the city, and maybe a little bit better source of where those expenses go. Personnel being the largest one. The change from 26 to 27 is $404,902. That's a 4.4% increase from 26. That is, of course, tied to wages and benefits. The union contracts with the city are all negotiated and set through 2028. So step increases for employees that still have a step to earn. We have a 10-step compensation plan. Once you've reached step 10, there are no more step increases at your anniversary, but you do still get the 4% in this contract cost of living adjustment. If there is still room in your 10-step scale at your annual anniversary date with a review that meets or exceeds expectations, then that employee gets a step increase as well. That varies across our pay plan at what the amount of the change is in those steps, but generally it's 3.5% to 4%, depending upon where you're at in that scale. The other note on the wages itself, that total, $404,000, is about a 5.25% levy increase on its own. And we'll just keep that number in mind as we go through the slides and we get later to talk more about the levy itself. You'll see that again. And that personnel cost makes up about 70% of our annual operating expenditures for the city. Supplies, you can see, are very flat. We've talked about that for many years when we look at our supplies budget. Even as cost of materials and supplies has gone up, that generally across the city year to year has stayed fairly flat. Departments have worked really hard to adjust their spending and the contracts for supplies they have to try to keep it within that means, but have worked really hard at trying to keep that as flat as possible. Other charges, that is all of the things in the line item budgets that isn't supplies. It'd be repairs and maintenance, it'd be utilities and buildings, miscellaneous expenditures, training and travel for employees. Those are all kind of things that are lumped into other charges. And then capital outlay, we touched on already. Transfers out, that ties to some of the budgets that are funded by the general fund but have their own fund set up, like the economic development or the transit as examples of that. The capital improvement plan, again, this is just the list of vehicles and equipment that are requested for 2027 budget. I didn't total them up, but just listed them. That you heard of each of these at the department presentations over the last couple of weeks. I did notate just the one in the police department, the SUV, that's requested at $65,000. That SUV is in our 2026 budget as well. If you all recall earlier this year when that request came forward, it didn't receive approval at the time. We have the fleet policy committee in the works. We met even again this week. We're coming closer to kind of a recommendation of a policy and a kind of scoring rubric to help score when vehicles would come up for replacement. It's not completely fine-tuned and finalized yet, but in the police department world, what we're looking at is keeping a SUV or a patrol vehicle in our fleet for 4 years or approximately 85,000 miles. And both of the 2 police vehicles that are listed in this budget would exceed that at this stage. They do even as of today. So whether, as we get through the discussion and we talk about the total budget request for 2027, if there's interest in reconsidering the squad that's budgeted for 2026 being ordered, potentially that could be something that could be taken care of this year and moved out of 27's budget. Okay. Any questions on any other items that are listed on that for now? Otherwise, I'll keep moving. Okay. The building maintenance fund, again, just to include the projects that are planned out of it. Reminder, the building maintenance fund is not tied to our general fund, so not tied to a property tax levy. It is funded with currently it's a $400,000 a year annual transfer from our water and light department. The projects planned in the budget this year are shown. Of course, the bottom one, fire station number 2 renovations at an approximate cost of $1.2 million. We do not have enough funds as of today in our building maintenance fund to single source pay for that project. It's the anticipation as we work through this budget that we will come up with a recommendation to council on how to fund that project, whether it be borrowing from another fund in the city and over time have the building maintenance fund pay that source fund back, and or any other direction we get from council as it relates to the general fund reserves itself. Okay, and maybe I should make note in the Parks Department, the Civic Center and the VFW Arena sound system, those are 2 items that Mr. Erickson did not present on when he presented last week. As we are working through the arena improvement projects, we have a remaining contingency and allowance that are floating along with the project for any unforeseen repairs that may come up as the project goes. And we're watching that budget very closely as a steering committee, Mayor Olsted, Councilmember Peterson, myself, Mr. Erickson, now that he's on board, are watching that budget very closely to consider if there are remaining funds left, what additional items we may be able to include in that project with those funds. The sound systems would be one of those that if we get to the end of the project and we have enough money, we may be able to source it rather than asking the building maintenance fund to touch on it. But for the purpose of the planning right now, we did include it as a 2027 project out of our building maintenance fund. Okay. Now looking at revenues, non-property tax revenues. To start, this would be any licenses and permit fees, franchise fees, whether that be Water and Light, Northern States Power, Xcel Energy, our cable providers in town, fines and forfeitures, anything that we charge for across the city, aside from property taxes, would be encompassed here. As you can see, there's a slight increase from 26 to 27, 17,937, less than a 1% increase to those. So just keep that again in mind as we talk about what the total revenue goal for the city is in 27. And then summarizing the expenditures and revenues for 2027. You'll see in the top right corner I have it circled. We do have, for the sake of the exercise, a 10% proposed levy increase in this spreadsheet as you see it. That gets us to this property tax levy number here to bring us essentially to a near balanced, a little better than a balanced budget plan with the planned expenditures that are proposed and in place. We'll talk about general fund reserves over the next couple of slides. But that gives you an idea of where we're sitting right now. Total expenditures increase from 26 to 27 again is that 458,712 number, or a 3.1% increase. Okay. General fund reserves, our 2025 audited fund balance is $7,614,910. If you go to towards the bottom, you'll see that brought us to a 2026. I'm jumping ahead. I'll go back. Fund balance of 2025 was that 7 million number. That was about a 51% fund balance. Projected revenues, 14,304,000. That's an 8% levy increase that was approved, including the 8% levy increase that was approved for 2026. Our expenditures was more than that at 14,608. So we did budget to spend out of our reserves. It's about $345,000 to get to a balanced budget for 2026. And assuming that's where we end the year, our remaining fund balance at year end would be the $7,310,635, or 51% of our reserves, 50% of our expenses. The fund balance policy the city has adopted is in line with the Office of the State Auditor's recommendations that we carry 5 months of operating expenditures or 35 to 50% of operating revenues. So you can see we're right at the high point of the reserve recommendation from the state. Another point to note on that is you all know we acquired the property from Simplot last year. The value, if you look at reserves, the value of that was about a 10 or 11% on our reserves. So that number is committed to something, so it is not shown as part of our uncommitted fund balance. When we can find a developer to work with to turn that property over and sell it, whatever revenue we generate from a sale of the land would go back into the general funds, and we'd see this number go back up due to that sale of the property again. Okay. Over this grid, we kind of laid out a few different proposed property tax levy increases. The 10% that I talked about to start, you'd see here what our beginning fund balance is. This line stays flat across all columns. The property tax levy here, this number changes based on which levy percent we would consider as a proposed levy. Our revenues change reflective of the amount of our property tax levy. The expenses stay the same again across all 4 options. And then the big line to look at is this revenues over expenditures based on which property tax levy we'd set, 10, 8, 5, or 3. You can see what our proposed spend out of our reserves would be to balance our budget. And then the bottom line being where we would anticipate our 2027 year-end reserves to be left should the planned spending stay as proposed and the property tax levy be set at one of those rates. And we can go back to that slide. Just last slide left, we have looked at over the course of the last 25 years or so what our property tax levy increases have been. You can see that they've really fluctuated from as low as -2% to as high as nearly 25%. If you spread this out of an average over all of those years, our average levy increase is about 6.46%. And again, I mentioned it earlier, if you look at our personnel for 2027 from 26, that's about a 5.25% levy increase. So looking at even just keeping in line with our cost of wages and benefits each year, we're fluctuating right in that 5 to 6% area, which I think kind of helps paint this picture of that average levy increase. Some of the larger levy increases, when you go back to look at 2016, 2017, those of you that were involved and on council in those years remember that our general fund reserves were below the recommended threshold, and we played a couple of years of catch up to get our reserves back to a healthier place. That has helped us in recent years. As you know, I think we're going on 3, maybe 4 years in a row now. We have planned to spend some of our reserves in order to balance our budget. And then along the way, had various things that have helped us not have to dip into those reserves and actually added to the reserve balance each year, whether it be through changes in personnel and saving some costs there, or a couple of years ago, there was a pretty large delinquent tax bill that was paid. This year, the reserve budget was increased by a pretty fair amount, largely due to decreased spending. We'd had a very dry winter and didn't need to move much snow, and so we saved a lot of time and effort on labor and fuel charges. So various things over the years, our general fund reserves has grown to a very healthy position, especially if you take into account the asset at that property that was owned by Simplot, and that can still be. It's not an uncommitted reserve at this point, but it's still an asset the city has that eventually will grow the fund balance back again. So that's the presentation. Happy to take any questions. The last slide, maybe just to talk through to set the stage for the discussion. The deadline in order for the city to set its preliminary levy is September 30th of each year. Our last regularly scheduled meeting in September is September 15th. There'd be a work session the following week, but our last order of business meeting is September 15th. So we would be looking to bring a preliminary levy proposal to that meeting for your consideration and approval, which means we'd have next week's regular meeting and the following week's work session to be able to answer questions and fine-tune this budget before we set the preliminary levy amount. The preliminary levy, of course, sets our max levy for the year. Between then and December, we can continue to fine-tune the budget and bring that proposed levy down. We cannot increase it from what we set it in September.
All right, thanks, Reid. Let's turn over to the council for questions on the topic. Anyone care to start?
You want to go to the wages?
Yeah. Let's start with the mayor here. Oh, you're fine.
That one?
You want to list out every department? Did you have?
I didn't have one that just touched on the wages for every department. This is total expenditures per department.
So the first one you had, that one you just had up there a second.
That one. Go back.
Go forward one then.
This is capital outlay.
Okay. Go to where you have the wages and everything that you had, like the total for each department.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay. This is total operating of the department, wages included, but it's all things operating.
So the question I do have on it is the library one. Yeah, we went down, looking to go down with that 914. Does that include your requests for increase in wages of part-time people?
It does not at this point, because we're still waiting on the HR consultants to come back. And so preliminary estimates are in the $67,000 range. But that's what I estimate. I don't know what HR
that line item there? Maybe just potentially ask. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. So.
And I apologize if that was not in there at that point, trying to come in at the end of April and trying to get all those numbers together to present the budget. That's quick.
I just wanted to be clear what it was.
Yeah.
Seemed lower than what I was anticipating in there, so.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Okay. Any other questions, Mayor? Okay. Any other questions for the council? Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you. I know I asked for this at the beginning of the year. Can we get a 3-year projection of what this would look like if, say, we had a 4% increase on the levy? I know we can't plan everything out, but we should know what our wages are going to be at. And if our wages are 70% of the budget on average, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Our reserves are in a really good spot. I would like to see some sort of a plan on how we want to use the reserves, not just this year, but over the next couple of years. Because I know we can't account for the Simplot property being in the reserves right now. But if it's going to be 60%, say we sell that property in the next 12 to 18 months, then our reserves are super high. I don't want to go through the process that happened, I think it was like 2012, where there was no levy increase for several years, and then all of a sudden we're playing catch up because things get out of whack. So I think we need to have a plan as to how we're going to spend that down and have a steady levy for our residents so that they can budget for their lives moving forward over the next 3 years. I think 3 years is a reasonable request. We've got city contracts with our unions through those 3 years, so we should know where our wages are going to be, assuming that our workforce stays the same. And we've saved on wages over the last couple of years. Just people leave, and it takes a little bit to fill a position. I think we can probably assume that kind of a turnover continues to happen as well when we're budgeting. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add on Ben's request. I think that will be an interesting analysis. We understand what the wages will be over the next 3 years. The other expenses, we would just have to assume a reasonable rate of inflation. I don't know what that is, if it's 3% or something like that. And then the property tax revenue, we would just have to look and see, the increased valuation of properties would be consistent, I would think, to kind of give us that ability to look a few years down the road, because we do use the reserves almost every year to kind of correct things a little bit. And not to say that doesn't work, but does that work forever? Or is there a time when that tool isn't at our disposal anymore? It would be good to know that years ahead of time, so if we had to make some corrections, we could do it without it being a panic. Go ahead, Tim.
To your point, some of the other communities have used their reserves extensively. Now they're paying the price. They're charging that 11, 12% levies, some 15. We don't want to get to that point. I like Ben's idea, 4 or 5%. Our citizens know what it is. Our department heads know what it is, so we got to keep it down within that realm. If it's something you need, guess what? You don't get it.
Could you go to that slide that showed the historical levy increases? I think you can see an interesting trend there, where we were pretty consistent. Things came up, and then things came down, and then things came back. We had the 3 and then the 8. Boy, I wish that was 5.5 and 5.5 rather than 3 and 8. Wouldn't that have been a better situation for everyone?
Yeah, I think that 10% in 2023, if my memory is correct, there was a really large health insurance increase that year in our group insurance policy. And that was the first year of a new contract. It was a 23 to 25 contract, if my memory's right. So I think that was something you could look to for the increase that year. And then you're right, we went a little lower in '25 because we had a big surplus in our 24 budget. And then we almost, we played catch up last year because we went low in '25. To get back to that, it's about 5% every year is just the cost of personnel, right? It seems like that's kind of the level point to find. Ben, to your point on the multi-year budget outlook, I can assure you we are working on that. Ms. Anderson put a lot of work into that over the last 10 days even. And I got an outlook from her today that takes a really just a high level look at what our wages are and adds a few points of inflation to every budget line. And we looked out through 2030, and based on that summary, it levels out to about an 8% levy each year.
Okay.
Again, and I will get this more fine-tuned and truly present it, but just for food for thought for where it is right now, that's kind of where it stands at this point. To get us, that would essentially, that would not dip into reserves at all. That would basically be a balanced budget each year.
Okay.
And so again, to your point, as we look at that plus our reserve budget balance and a plan for how to use the reserves within that healthy limit, maybe it brings us back to that 5 or 6% over the next 5 years.
Yeah. When's the last time the city came in over budget at the end of a year?
I couldn't say.
Right. And are we actually spending fund balance dollars, or are we planning to spend it and then we don't spend it? Or are we actually spending fund balance dollars?
We're actually spending some.
Okay.
Might be not what we budgeted,
Yep.
just because, like we talked about people leaving and,
Right.
so positions are opened and, taxpayers. So like when we budget, we actually budget that the taxpayers are going to pay up to 100%. We don't ever, put in an allocation for that, 5% might not come in. So, there's a little bit of leeway both ways to try cover those things. The other, when I did the estimations for 28, 29, and 30, I also made the estimation that on our salaries, it's 4%, but it's only through 2028, that I estimated 4% for 29 and 30 also. Just so we know that, though the contract has not been settled.
Yep.
What do you think for health insurance, Karla? Did you use 2?
I use 15% every year.
It's a brutal number, isn't it? Every single year.
But that's reality, I hate to say it. So, so we did build them in there. Supplies were, level. Again, we didn't increase any of them. But we just worked on the personnel side. And what people had in for their capital improvements from what they had given for us, for the next 5 years. Those are in there. Just supplies are, are stagnant, and utilities are stagnant, and and it's like we talked about with snow removal. Well, one year we will get hit, the next year we won't. And the other thing that's also interesting is that our year ends December 31st, so it depends when you get the snow. So if you get the snow in November and then you don't have it in January and then you don't get it till the next January, it's hard because it crosses a couple of years. Look at the school districts, they're done in June, so they have one winter season.
Okay. Any other questions for Reid or Karla? I don't see any, but again, this is as clear as it's ever been laid out for me, and I really appreciate all the time and the granular step-through process here. So this is really helpful. Appreciate the extra work. Okay. That does bring us to the end of our agenda for today. Any final questions or comments? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Helms.
Second.
Second by Pakshavinsky. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Meeting is closed. Thank you.